This story is titled, My Siblings Refuse to Allow Me to Attend Their Weddings, so I Return the Favor. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hi Reddit. I never thought I'd find myself posting here, but I'm seriously losing my mind over what went down 2 weeks ago. It's been eating away at me, and I need to put it out there to see if I'm overreacting, or if this whole situation is as insane as it feels. So get ready, because this one's a doozy. Growing up, I was always the little one. My name is Emily, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My siblings, Mike, Chris, Rachel, and Josh, were all so much older than me that sometimes I felt like I was part of a different family. By the time I was old enough to start forming memories, they were already moving out, going to college, or starting their adult lives. It was like I was an afterthought, a weird tag-along they had to put up with. But even so, I loved them. When you're the youngest kid, you look up to your older siblings like they're heroes. I thought Mike hung the moon when I was little. He was the cool oldest brother who could do no wrong. Chris was quieter and more serious, but I still adored him. Rachel was my big sister, the one I always hoped would let me into her life and show me how to be like her. And Josh, the baby of the older ones, felt the closest to me in age, but even he kept me at arm's length. The first time it really hit me how I didn't matter to them was Mike's wedding. I was 10 years old. 10 is that weird age where you feel old enough to be included in grown-up things, but still young enough to be treated like a child. When Mike and his fiancée Sarah announced they were having a child-free wedding, I assumed that didn't mean me. I mean, I wasn't some random kid who would throw food or scream during the vows. I was his sister. I still remember the day my parents sat me down. I'd been so excited. I even asked my mom if I could wear one of her necklaces for the big day. That's when she said it. Mike and Sarah are having an adults-only wedding, Emily. You're not going to be able to come. I stared at her for a second, trying to process. But I'm not like other kids, I said, trying to reason with her. I'll be quiet. I promise. She patted my head like I was some kind of puppy. It's just for adults, sweetie. You'll understand when you're older. I didn't understand at all. I cried in my room for hours. Mike was my brother, and I wanted to see him get married. I wanted to be there to watch Sarah, who I already thought of as my sister, walk down the aisle. But instead, my parents left me with a babysitter. I remember the feeling of staring at the clock that day, imagining everything I was missing. When Mike came home from his honeymoon, I thought maybe he'd bring it up. Maybe he'd say he was sorry I couldn't come, or tell me some funny story from the wedding. But he didn't. He acted like I wasn't even a part of it, like I wasn't even worth acknowledging. 2 years later, Chris got engaged. I was 12 by then, and I thought things would be different. I was older, quieter, and very well behaved. I didn't whine or cause a fuss, and I made sure everyone knew it. So when they said his wedding was child-free too, I thought, okay, but this time I'll be invited. Nope. Once again, I got the same speech. Chris and his fiancée want the wedding to be adults only, Emily. It's not personal. Not personal? It felt personal. How could it not be personal when it happened twice? I tried not to cry this time. I was older and I wanted to act more mature. I didn't beg or scream. I just sat quietly while my parents made their excuses. My mom even tried to comfort me. You'll have your own wedding someday, and it'll be wonderful. You'll see. But it didn't make me feel better. I was starting to realize something. My siblings didn't see me as family, at least not in the way I saw them. When Rachel got engaged, I was 15. By then, I was a full-on teenager who wanted nothing more than to feel included. At first, Rachel didn't even plan on banning kids from her wedding. She wanted everyone to come. But of course, the family had to get involved. My aunts and uncles kept saying things like, "It's so refreshing to have a wedding without kids running wild. And children just make things so chaotic." Eventually, Rachel caved. The rule became no one under 16. I was 15. 15. So close that it felt like a slap in the face. I went to Rachel and asked, "Can't I just be an exception? I'm your sister. I'll be quiet, I promise." Rachel looked at me with this serious expression and said, "If I make an exception for you, what about the other kids? It wouldn't be fair." Fair? Are you kidding me? I lost it. I started yelling, "It's not fair that I can't go to any of your weddings. I'm not just some kid, I'm your sister." That's when my parents got involved. I got grounded for 6 months for disrespecting Rachel and causing drama. 6 months. I spent most of that time in my room, just stewing in my anger and hurt. By the time Josh got engaged when I was 17, I didn't even bother asking. I already knew I wouldn't be invited. Sure enough, the announcement came, child-free wedding. At that point, I was numb to it. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, and I didn't ask why. I just accepted it. But what really stung? My cousin Amanda, who had just turned 18, was invited. I heard about it through the family grapevine. Apparently, they thought 18 was the cutoff. The irony wasn't lost on me. Amanda was only a few months older than me, but she got to go because she'd hit the magical age of adulthood. When my parents asked why I didn't make a big deal congratulating Josh, I just shrugged. I sent him a quick text. Congrats. Hope it's a great day. Then I locked myself in my room like I always did. By that point, I had started to check out emotionally. I realized that I just didn't matter to them. I wasn't their little sister. I was just a kid they barely thought about. And it hurt. It really, really hurt. Years passed after the last wedding. I stopped trying to fit into my siblings' lives because, honestly, I was just tired. Tired of being the one left out. Tired of being the kid sister, who no one cared about unless it was convenient for them. By the time I met my now fiancé, Tyler, I'd pretty much checked out of the family dynamic. I didn't expect much from anyone anymore. Tyler was the first person to actually listen when I told him about my family. I remember sitting on his couch, telling him about how I'd been banned from 4 of my siblings' weddings, and he looked genuinely shocked. Wait, they didn't invite you? Not even when you were like 15? Nope, I said, trying to play it off like it didn't hurt anymore. What the hell? You're their sister, he said. He just sat there shaking his head for a minute before adding, that's seriously messed up. I think that was when I realized it really was messed up. I'd spent so many years convincing myself it was normal. Child-free weddings sounded reasonable on paper. It wasn't like I was being deliberately targeted, right? But no. 4 times my family chose to exclude me. Not a single sibling thought, hey, Emily should be there. It wasn't normal. So when Tyler and I got engaged a few years later, I knew one thing for certain. My wedding was going to be different. My wedding was going to be full of people who actually cared about me. People who wanted to celebrate me, not just show up because it was expected of them. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't inviting my siblings. It wasn't some big dramatic moment. I didn't write an angry letter or announce it in the family group chat. I just left them off the guest list. Simple as that. I knew it would blow up eventually, but I figured I'd cross that bridge when I got there. The first sign of trouble came about 2 months before the wedding. My mom called me randomly one afternoon, acting weirdly chipper. I should have known something was up. So, Emily, she said in that voice she always used when she wanted something. How are the wedding plans coming along? Good, I said cautiously. Everything's almost done. That's great, she said, pausing for a moment before adding, your brothers and sister haven't gotten their invitations yet. Did you send them out already? My heart started pounding. I didn't want to have this conversation. Not yet. Yeah, I sent them out, I said, trying to sound casual. She didn't miss a beat. Well, they didn't get one. Maybe it got lost in the mail? I sighed. Mom, I didn't invite them. There was silence on the other end of the line, just a heavy, shocked pause. Then came the explosion. What? Emily, how could you not invite your own family? Your siblings? What's wrong with you? I gripped the phone and tried to stay calm. They didn't invite me to their weddings, Mom. Not a single one of them. So I'm returning the favor. It's fair. She sounded like I just committed a crime. That was different. You were young. They didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. Well, it hurt anyway. And now I'm done pretending like it didn't. She started in on the guilt trip immediately. Emily, you're being spiteful. Family is family. You don't just shut them out like this. What are people going to think? And there it was. What will people think? My mom's favorite concern. I cut her off before she could say anything else. I don't care what people think, Mom. This is my wedding, and I'm only inviting people who care about me. They didn't care enough to include me in their big days, so I don't see why they deserve to be at mine. She hung up on me. I wasn't surprised. That night, the group chat blew up. It started with Rachel being fake as usual. Hey, Em, did something happen with the mail? We haven't gotten our invites yet. Then came Chris, blunt as always. What's going on? Why aren't we invited? I stared at my phone for a long time, debating whether or not to reply. Part of me wanted to lay it all out, to tell them exactly how much they'd hurt me over the years. But another part of me didn't see the point. They wouldn't get it. They never had. So I didn't say anything. I just left the chat on read. Tyler noticed I was quiet during dinner and asked what was wrong. I showed him the messages, and he shook his head. You don't owe them an explanation, Em. They made their choices. Yeah, but I trailed off. They're gonna make me out to be the bad guy. I know it. Let them, he said firmly. You know the truth. That's all that matters. The next day, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. I didn't even have to ask what they were there for. My mom came storming in the second I opened the door. What are you thinking, Emily? Not inviting your own siblings to your wedding? What kind of person does that? I tried to stay calm, even though my patience was wearing thin. Mom, I told you. They didn't think I was important enough to include in their weddings, so I'm not including them in mine. My dad finally spoke up, his voice stern. You're being childish, Emily. You're holding on to something that happened years ago. That's when I snapped. I was a child when they did it, Dad. I begged to be at their weddings, and they all shut me out. Don't talk to me about being childish when I was the one left crying at home 4 times. They didn't know what to say to that. My mom looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't let her guilt me this time. You can keep defending them if you want, but I'm not changing my mind. If they cared about me, they would have shown it back then. They left, furious and frustrated. Over the next few days, the messages from my siblings got nastier. Chris called me selfish. Rachel said I was ruining the family. Josh didn't even bother sugarcoating it. You're being petty, Emily. Grow up. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. Tyler hugged me one night while I was scrolling through their messages and said, I'm proud of you, for standing up for yourself. And for the first time, I felt proud of myself too. After the first round of family drama, I expected things to die down. I figured they'd grumble to each other for a while, maybe complain to some distant cousins, and then move on. That's how things usually went when my family didn't get their way, but I underestimated just how big of a deal they were going to make this. It started small. Rachel, of course, couldn't resist posting a passive-aggressive status on Facebook. Family is forever, even when some people forget what that word means. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Tyler was scrolling next to me on the couch, and when I showed him the post, he shook his head. What is she, 14? Basically, I muttered, trying to brush it off. I told myself it didn't matter. I knew the truth, and I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. But it still bugged me. It's hard not to feel hurt when your own sister goes out of her way to take shots at you publicly. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, little jabs started showing up in our extended family group chat. I'd muted it a long time ago, but Tyler still checked his phone one afternoon and said, Emily? You might want to see this. The messages were flying. Rachel. It's so sad when family starts prioritizing petty grudges over love. Chris. I just don't understand. I thought we were better than this. And then Mike, good old, I'm the eldest and I know best Mike, decided to take his shot. I never realized how much bitterness you've been holding on to, Emily. It's really sad. You're ruining relationships over something that happened years ago. I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. They didn't get it. They still didn't get it. They made it sound like I was blowing a minor issue out of proportion, as if they hadn't spent my entire life excluding me. I wanted to reply. I wanted to type out every single thing they had done and make them see how hypocritical they were being, but I knew better. Arguing with them would just give them more ammunition. They'd spin my words into me being dramatic or unstable or whatever else they wanted to say to avoid taking responsibility. Instead, I did the one thing they never expected. I left the group chat. That night, my mom called me. I knew she'd heard about the group chat incident because she jumped straight into yelling the second I answered. Emily, what is wrong with you? Hi, Mom, I said flatly. Don't start with that attitude, she snapped. Do you know what you've done? Your siblings are heartbroken. You're destroying this family. Heartbroken? I laughed bitterly. They ignored me my entire childhood. But now they're heartbroken? Give me a break. You're being so spiteful, she said. You've always been like this, holding on to grudges and making everything about you. That's when I lost it. I'm the one holding grudges. I was 10 when Mike got married. 10. I cried because I wanted to be there, and you all told me I didn't matter enough to be included. And it didn't stop there. It happened again and again and again. I begged to be at Rachel's wedding, and she told me no, because it wouldn't be fair. That was years ago, she said dismissively. Yeah, and I'm still living with the way it made me feel. You all decided I wasn't important enough back then. Why should you suddenly get a front row seat to my life now? She didn't have an answer to that. Instead, she tried to flip the script. This isn't about the weddings, Emily. This is about you pushing everyone away because you're bitter. Tyler's probably encouraging you, isn't he? I groaned. Mom, stop blaming Tyler. This has nothing to do with him. This is about me finally realizing I deserve better than to be treated like I don't matter. Her voice softened, like she was trying to play the concerned mother. Emily, you don't understand. Family is all you'll have in the end. Friends and partners come and go, but your family is forever. No, I said firmly. Family is supposed to care about you. They're supposed to love and support you. That's not what you've been to me. She started crying. Big dramatic sobs that I knew were more about guilt-tripping me than anything else. You'll regret this one day, Emily, she said through her tears. You'll see. I don't think I will, I said quietly, before hanging up. Over the next week, things got worse. I blocked Rachel and Chris on social media because I couldn't take the constant snide comments. My mom called Tyler twice, apparently hoping to talk sense into him. He didn't answer. Then Mike sent me a long email. Yes, an actual email. About forgiveness and family unity. He even had the nerve to quote some Bible verse about letting go of anger. I didn't respond. Tyler and I sat down one night, and I vented about everything. It's like they're determined to pretend I'm the problem. They don't see how messed up it is that they ignored me for years, and then flipped out when I finally stood up for myself. You know what it is? Tyler said. They're not mad that they weren't invited. They're mad that they don't get to control you anymore. That hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. My whole life, my family had treated me like an afterthought, like someone they could dismiss whenever it suited them. But now that I was doing something for myself, something they couldn't control, they couldn't handle it. They'll get over it eventually, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. And then Tyler said something that really stuck with me. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But either way, it's not your problem. He was right. For the first time, I realized I didn't owe my family anything. Not my time, not my attention, and certainly not an invitation to my wedding. A week later, my dad sent me a short, guilt-laden text. Emily, your mom isn't doing well. She's really upset about all of this. Maybe you could reconsider? I stared at it for a long time before replying. Maybe she should have thought about that before ignoring me all those years. I hit send, then blocked his number. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The weeks leading up to my wedding were a strange mix of excitement and tension. On one hand, I was thrilled to finally marry Tyler and have the day I'd been dreaming of since I was a kid. On the other hand, the drama with my family still lingered like an unwelcome guest. My parents had stopped calling me directly, probably because I'd blocked my mom's number after her last meltdown. But that didn't stop the noise. The worst was when my aunt called me out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to her in years, so I was immediately suspicious when her name popped up on my phone. I answered, and she got right to the point. Emily, honey, I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this, she said, in her sweet but condescending tone. Family is family. It's not right to leave your siblings out of your wedding. I sighed, gripping the phone a little tighter. Aunt Linda, it's not just about the wedding. This has been years in the making. I'm not going to change my mind. But it's family, she pressed, like that word was supposed to fix everything. I'm sure they didn't mean to hurt you back then. Can't you just let it go and be the bigger person? I closed my eyes, trying not to snap. Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It's about knowing when to put yourself first. There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear her sigh dramatically. Well, I just hope you don't regret this. One day, you're going to miss your family, and they won't be there. I didn't say anything. I just hung up. The morning of the wedding, I woke up feeling an odd combination of peace and nerves. It wasn't the normal, what if something goes wrong, kind of wedding day jitters. It was more like I was waiting for a shoe to drop. I knew my family wasn't invited, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd find a way to insert themselves into the day somehow. But Tyler, being the amazing guy he is, refused to let me dwell on it. When I told him about my worries as we got ready separately, he just smiled and said, This day is about us. Nothing else matters. If anyone tries to ruin it, I'll personally escort them out. That made me laugh, and for the first time in weeks, I felt lighter. The venue we chose was perfect. It was small and intimate, a garden surrounded by flowers, twinkle lights strung through the trees, and a little gazebo where we'd say our vows. I didn't want a giant, elaborate wedding. I wanted something that felt real and full of love, and that's exactly what it was. My closest friends were there, along with some extended family who'd actually been kind to me over the years. It felt right. As I stood in front of the mirror, putting the final touches on my dress, my maid of honor, my best friend Jenna, walked in and grinned. You look amazing, Em. Thanks, I said softly, feeling a wave of emotions. Jenna sat on the edge of the couch and watched me for a moment. Are you okay? I hesitated before nodding. Yeah, I don't know. Sad, I guess. Not about today. Today's perfect, but about the fact that my family isn't here. She frowned and leaned forward. Emily, it's okay to feel that. Just because you made the right choice doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Her words hit me hard. I turned to look at her, tears welling up in my eyes. I wanted them to care, you know. I wanted them to fight for me when I was a kid. And they never did. Jenna stood up and hugged me tightly. You don't need their approval. You have people who love you. Focus on that. I nodded, taking a deep breath. She was right. Today wasn't about my family. It was about me and Tyler. When the ceremony started, I was so overwhelmed by the beauty of it all that I forgot about everything else. I remember standing at the end of the aisle, staring at Tyler, and thinking, this is it. This is what happiness feels like. As I walked toward him, I felt this sense of freedom wash over me. I wasn't the forgotten little sister anymore. I wasn't the kid who begged to be included and got turned away. I was a bride, surrounded by people who truly loved me and wanted to see me happy. The vows were perfect. Tyler promised to love me, protect me, and always stand by my side, and I promised the same. By the time we said, I do, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience, including mine. The reception was everything I hoped it would be. We laughed, we ate, we danced until our feet hurt. My friends toasted to us, sharing funny stories and heartfelt wishes for our future. Tyler's parents, who had always been so kind to me, told me they were proud to have me as part of their family. At one point, I snuck away from the crowd just to take it all in. I stood at the edge of the garden, looking at the lights twinkling in the trees and the people laughing together, and I felt so full. For so many years, I'd believed the lie my family told me, that I didn't matter, that I wasn't important enough to be part of their lives. But standing there, watching all these people who truly cared about me, I realized something. I matter to the people who actually deserve to know me. Later that night, as the reception started winding down, one of my cousins pulled me aside. Hey, Emily, I probably shouldn't say this, but I groaned. What is it now? She looked sheepish. Your mom and Rachel apparently threw some kind of dinner tonight, like as an alternative to your wedding. I stared at her for a second, then burst out laughing. Are you serious? She nodded. I know, it's pathetic. I just thought you should know. I shook my head, still laughing. That's fine. Let them throw their pity party. I hope the food's good. I could tell my cousin expected me to be upset, but honestly, I wasn't. If anything, it was proof that I'd made the right decision. My family had spent my whole life excluding me, and then trying to justify it. Now that I was the one drawing the boundary, they couldn't handle it. At the end of the night, Tyler and I shared one last dance while everyone gathered around us. As we swayed together, I whispered, I'm so happy we did this. He smiled down at me. Me too, Em. This is just the beginning. And for the first time, I believed it. My family wasn't there. They didn't get to see the best day of my life. But that was their loss, not mine. Because as I looked around the room, surrounded by love and laughter, I realized I had everything I'd ever needed, and none of it had come from them. I thought the worst of it was over after the wedding. I really did. The day had been perfect, everything I hoped for and more, and I felt like I'd finally moved on from my family's nonsense. I didn't miss them at the ceremony. I didn't spend a second wondering what it would have been like if they were there. I was surrounded by people who loved me, and that was enough. But if there's one thing I've learned about my family, it's that they don't like being ignored. It's almost like they couldn't handle the fact that I was happy without them, so they decided to stir the pot one last time. It started with a message from Rachel a week after the wedding. Of course it was Rachel. She'd always been the one to throw the first stone when it came to family drama. Saw some pics from your wedding. I can't believe you had it in a garden. Looked casual, but I guess that's what you wanted. I stared at the message, stunned. She couldn't even pretend to be nice. It wasn't enough for her to just leave me alone. She had to find something to criticize. I was tempted to reply with something snarky, something about how her wedding might have been fancier, but at least mine wasn't full of fake smiles and people who didn't care about me. But I stopped myself. I didn't owe her a response. A few days later, I started getting messages from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, Rachel, Mike, and Chris were on some kind of campaign to paint me as the villain. My Aunt Linda, yes, the same one who tried guilt-tripping me before the wedding, sent me another message. Emily, I don't know what happened between you and your siblings, but they're really hurt. Rachel says she tried to reach out, and you're ignoring her. Maybe it's time to let go of the past? I sighed and rolled my eyes. How many times did I have to explain this? How many people did my siblings need to rope into this mess before they realized I wasn't budging? Tyler noticed I was frustrated and sat down beside me. Another guilt trip? He asked, glancing at my phone. Yeah, Aunt Linda again. She says they're hurt. He snorted. Hurt because they can't control you anymore. I smiled faintly. He wasn't wrong. I just don't get it. They ignored me for years. I begged to be included in their lives, and they shut me out. Now suddenly, I'm the bad guy for setting boundaries? That's how it always goes, he said softly. When you start protecting yourself, the people who hurt you are the first ones to cry about it. The real low point came a few days later when my mom showed up unannounced. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Tyler and I were having a lazy day, making brunch in pajamas, laughing over burnt pancakes. We heard a knock at the door, and I froze. I just knew it was her. Sure enough, I opened the door to find my mom standing there, looking as dramatic as ever. "Emily," she said, her voice already carrying that familiar tone of disappointment. "We need to talk," I sighed. "Mom, now isn't a good time." She didn't care. She pushed the door open slightly, trying to step inside. Tyler appeared behind me, gently putting his hand on my shoulder for support. "Emily, please," she continued. "This has gone far enough. Your siblings are devastated. I'm devastated. Do you really think this is how family should act?" I clenched my jaw and kept my voice calm. "You don't get to show up here and lecture me, Mom. I invited the people who care about me to my wedding. They didn't make the cut, and that's their fault, not mine." Her face fell into that familiar look of disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend how I could possibly stand up to her. "You don't mean that. They love you, Emily. They're your family." "No, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "They're not. Family doesn't make you feel small. Family doesn't leave you out when you're a kid and then demand to be part of your life when it's convenient for them. I spent my entire life trying to prove I mattered to them, and they never cared. I'm done." She blinked, stunned into silence for once. I could tell she wanted to argue, but Tyler stepped forward, his voice gentle but strong. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said simply. My mom looked between the two of us, her face a mix of anger and sadness. "You'll regret this, Emily," she said, her voice soft now, like she was delivering a prophecy. "You'll miss us one day, and we won't be there." I met her eyes, unflinching. "No, Mom, I won't." Tyler shut the door behind her, and for a moment, I just stood there, trying to process it. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I didn't. I felt relief. The next day, I got a text from Chris. "Mom said she came to talk to you, and you slammed the door in her face. Real mature, Emily. You've turned into someone I don't even recognize." I read the message aloud to Tyler, who shook his head. "Block him. You don't need that." And I did. One by one, I blocked every sibling and relative who decided to pile onto the guilt train. I realized something important that day. I didn't owe them my time, my energy, or even an explanation. For years, they made me feel invisible. Now, I was taking control. The weeks that followed were quiet for the first time in a long time. Without the constant messages and passive-aggressive comments, I finally felt like I could breathe. Tyler and I focused on settling into married life, decorating our little apartment, and planning our future. One night, we sat on the couch, watching some cheesy movie, and Tyler turned to me. "Do you regret it at all, not having them at the wedding?" I thought about it for a moment before shaking my head. I thought I would, but I don't. I spent so long trying to earn their approval, and for what? I don't miss them. I don't miss feeling like I'm not good enough. He smiled and squeezed my hand. "Good. You deserve better." And he was right. I did deserve better. A month after the wedding, I got one final message. This time it was from Rachel's number, sent through a different phone since I'd already blocked her. "You've destroyed this family, Emily. I hope you're happy." I stared at the screen for a second before deleting the message. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt done, because I was happy. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. I wasn't begging for scraps of love and attention. I was surrounded by people who cared about me, and that was enough. It always had been.
I am a 16-year-old girl who has gone to private school my whole life. My dad works as an IT consultant and makes good money, so we can pay for it. Recently, he and my stepmother, Donna, told me that I had to change to public school because they couldn't pay for my high school tuition anymore. I want to change schools. All my friends are here, and I tried to talk them out of it, but they just said I had to either change or set up my own tuition. The second option was clearly not possible for me since I'm only 16. If I get a part-time job, it still won't be enough to pay for anything. I was really worried about what to do because I couldn't ask anyone else for money. I already talked to my dad about it, but he made it clear that if I asked anyone else in the family for money, he would never talk to me again because it would be embarrassing. I really had no other choice, and I thought I might have to leave my private school and go to public school. But because of my grandparents, that's not happening now. A few days ago, I learned that my grandparents were sending my dad paychecks every month to help me with money. But he was using that money to give his stepkids a fancy lifestyle instead. My mom died when I was 7, but Donna's ex-husband is still living. They are not happy together, so she asked for a divorce a few years ago, and her kids were not happy with her for that. When she began dating my dad and got remarried, her kids became even more far away from her. I think that's why my dad and Donna have been treating her 2 kids really well, so they would finally like them. They are just trying to win over her kids by buying things, and I'm not sure who is more shallow here, her kids, who are about my age and should understand better, or Donna and my dad. Last week, I discovered all of this by chance. Her kids had come over on Friday to stay for the weekend, and I noticed that when they arrived, their bags were relatively light and didn't look very stuffed. But by Sunday night, after they had packed up to leave the next morning, their bags looked overstuffed. I know it's not right to go snooping through somebody else's belongings, but curiosity got the better of me, and I had been curious about their lifestyle for a long time. While they were asleep, I looked through their stuff and saw that they had packed a lot of fancy bags and shoes in their duffel bags. I figured it had to be from my dad and Donna, because how else would they get things like this while staying here? They stayed home the whole time, and no visitors came by. It must be them. I was really surprised because, on one side, they said they had money problems, but on the other side, they were giving really expensive gifts to Donna's kids. It just didn't make sense, and I felt like something was happening. The next morning, just before they were going to leave, I talked to Donna's kids about what was in their bags. At first, they were unsure about telling me, but then the older brother said that for the last few years, my dad and Donna had been giving them nice gifts. He thinks it's likely to help them welcome my dad into the family and see him as a father figure. They take their gifts, but don't want to accept my father as their dad because they already have a dad and don't want to pretend to be a happy family with another man. He thought he was teaching me about my dad and family values, but I didn't really care about any of it. I only cared that my dad had not told me the truth. I saw that Donna's kids lived in a way that was really different from how I live. They always wore clothes from fancy brands, and almost everything they had was branded. They always looked like they had a lot of money with them. I thought it was their dad, but it seems like it was actually my dad. I was really angry after talking to them, so that day I went to my grandparents' house and told them everything. That's when I learned from them that they had been sending checks to my father ever since my mom died. I think he just started using those checks for things besides me. They were just as angry as I was, and after talking with them, I chose to stay with them for a few weeks until everything was sorted out. But now I think I have to stay here for a long time because my grandparents talked to my dad, and my dad got upset. I'm not sure what they talked about, but it was obvious there was a big argument. Now my dad and Donna are worried and texting me to tell my grandparents to stop. My grandparents sent them an illegal notice saying they took money that wasn't theirs. My grandparents can sue them for it because there was a contract signed when I was younger. Sadly for my dad, it was him who came up with the idea. The contract states that my grandparents will keep helping me with money and support my dad until I finish college, and that's what they have been doing. But my dad didn't keep his part of the agreement, so it makes sense that he's being taken to court. At the same time, my dad has been texting me, telling me that he's planning on starting his own business, and in a couple of months needs to save up money. He cannot afford to go after a lawyer and fight with my grandparents over something so petty. So he's asking me to do something to call it off, and I can tell that he's really panicked about it. He's been requesting me to come back so we can talk it out, but I really don't feel like doing it because it all just seems very unfair to me. So AITA for setting my grandparents after my father. Thank you everyone for all the comments and support. Things have been very difficult for me emotionally recently, so I really needed that. The situation in my family is at an all-time low, and I feel very responsible for it. But honestly, I know that I'm doing the right thing, and that's what matters. My paternal grandparents called me up a couple of days ago and told me that I was ungrateful, saying I was being bratty and selfish, and then blocked me everywhere. So make of that what you will. I know that my dad's side of the family all thinks this way. They think I'm being selfish and entitled. They don't understand that my dad had literally been using the funds that my grandparents had been sending him to win over his stepkids instead of supporting me financially, which is what the money had originally been meant for. I don't even know if my dad's side of the family knows the whole truth, or if they just want to come after me and make me feel bad for standing up for myself. In the past few days, I've spoken to my grandparents at length about the situation. I've told them how bad I feel about it, but they've only told me that none of this would have happened if my dad had just been upfront and honest about everything. He was the one who put me in this difficult position first, by telling me to arrange my high school tuition for myself, knowing full well that it would be impossible for me to do so, and that I would eventually have to switch to public school. He was willing to sacrifice my education for the sake of his kids. From what we know, my dad could have brought them the moon, and they still wouldn't have accepted him into their family. So I don't even know what he was acting so needy for anyway. The bottom line is that he did not feel bad for manipulating me, lying to me, and taking away the money that rightfully belongs to me. So I shouldn't feel bad about anything that I'm doing now. In fact, I'm barely even doing anything. It's all my grandparents who are dealing with the legal side of things. So I just need to chill out, and that's what I'm trying to do. Since I'm discussing the legal aspect of things, I learned a lot about it over the past couple of days from my grandparents. Apparently, after my mom passed away, my dad had been struggling with work because he was depressed and had been fired from his job. Naturally, that made it very difficult for him to take care of me because at that point, he was only in his mid-20s and didn't have much saved. That's when my grandparents decided to step in for a few months until he was back on his feet. But then my dad insisted that financial help from them would make things much easier for him, and he would really appreciate it if they could commit to it long-term, even after he got back on his feet. He promised them that the money would only be used for me, and whatever was left over each month would go into a savings account for me that I could dip into any time in the future. He said that this is exactly what my mother would have wanted as well, and since they were in a position to help, my grandparents agreed to it. My dad got the lawyers involved, had a contract drawn up, which my grandparents thought was a bit unnecessary, but now they are glad for it. Thanks to that contract, they can sue my father for not sticking to their agreement because clearly he had been dipping into the savings. I had no idea about any of this for the past 16 years, but I guess that was a good reason. I don't think my grandparents or my dad would have wanted me to know about this. But now I'm glad that I know because it's making things much easier for me, and I don't feel as guilty. I don't understand why my father couldn't have just raised me to the best of his capabilities like a lot of other single parents. I don't understand why he had to go out and demand help from my maternal grandparents, but it gave me the life that I'm used to, so I can't complain. I don't think I'll ever understand his reasons for anything, and I've stopped trying as well because it just messes with my head. A lot. I'm just trying to focus on school right now because in my personal life, everything is a total mess. The more I think about it, the worse I end up feeling. So I guess I'll just have to try and chill out, like I said. Okay, so it's been 2 weeks since I left home, and since then, I have been staying with my grandparents. After the first few days, I blocked my dad because he had been texting me relentlessly, trying to get me to feel guilty, so I would talk to my grandparents and get them to back off with the lawyers and stuff. But after a while, it got really old, and I knew that if I did not block him, he would just keep trying to guilt trip me, and eventually he might succeed. So I didn't want that, and that's why I blocked him. It's not like I didn't miss him, of course I did, but I had to do what was good for me. Also, after what his parents said to me, calling me selfish and entitled and whatnot, I don't think I wanted to have anything to do with that side of the family right now. For the past week and a half, I haven't had any contact with my father. But today, he finally reached out to me once again. He called me up from a burner phone, so I couldn't recognize the number. When I picked up, I heard his voice, and I immediately thought about hanging up, but then he told me not to do so, probably because he was aware of the situation being so bad that I wouldn't even want to talk to him. Anyway, he did most of the talking. He told me that he was really sorry about everything. He said that he knew that he had failed me and hadn't been prioritizing me, but he just wanted me to come back home so we could sort things out. He didn't even care about the lawyers. He could pay back all the money that he spent over the years on his stepkids, and he would make sure that the calculations were all verified by my grandparents and their lawyer, so it would be a very transparent transaction. He was ready to do all that it took, but all he wanted was for me to come back because he really missed me. At that part, he started crying. I could tell that he was being sincere about everything, and it was difficult for me. But through tears, I had to tell him that I really needed some space and time away from him to sort out how I felt about this entire situation. Of course, all of this has been a huge betrayal to me. I feel terrible about it, and it's not that easy for me to just forget about it and pretend like everything is fine. So I can forgive him and move on and go back to staying with him. I thought that he was going to get defensive or maybe argue with me about it or something. But instead, he just told me that he could understand what he had put me through, and he was really sorry about it. He had lost sight of what was important, and he had ended up spending way too much time, energy, and money on kids that were not his, instead of prioritizing the one child that was actually his flesh and blood. There was nothing in the world that was more disappointing to him than that. So instead of fighting with me on that, he actually validated my decision and said that if he had been in my place, he would probably feel the same way. He understands and respects my need to stay away from him at the moment. That was sad. But before he was about to hang up, I told him that one thing he could do for me was come to a settlement with my grandparents. Like he had said, he was willing to return all the money and have a very transparent transaction process, verified by the lawyer and stuff. That would put an end to all of this, and I think that's what I really wanted, to have things sorted out in my family. So this was something that he could do for me. I asked him once again, and I thought he was going to decline, but he told me that he had been planning on coming to a settlement anyway. He knew that he was wrong and didn't want to waste more money on a lawyer fighting a lawsuit where he knew he had messed up anymore. That was good news, but until he actually makes a move to back off, I'm not going to tell anybody anything. I don't want to get ahead of myself. However, after that conversation, I did unblock my father. I don't know how to feel about the situation at the moment, but the truth is that I really do miss him. He is the only parent I have left, and I know that he has messed up in the past few years. But before that, he used to be the most amazing father. Even in the past few years, apart from the whole financial situation, he has been there for me emotionally at all times. I know it sounds ridiculous, but currently I'm actually really confused about what to do regarding the situation with my father. Because I know that most people would say that I shouldn't forgive him and that I should never talk to him again and stuff. But then again, that's not how I feel. I've thought about it, and I really do want my father in my life. But I'm not sure if forgiving him right now is the right thing to do, especially after that phone call. I'm just even more of a mess than I was before. Hey, so it's been a few days since I posted last, and since then, there have been a lot of opinions in the comment section. A lot of opinions regarding whether I should forgive my father and whether I should reconnect with him or whatever. All I have to say to that is, I really value all the advice that people have for me, but I think this is something that I have to deal with on my own. After all, I'm just 16. I don't think that even if I do make a decision right now, I'll be able to stick to it for the rest of my life. Besides, that's a huge part of the thing as well. I have my whole life ahead of me. And while I can deal with not having my father involved in my life at the moment, I don't think I'm going to be fine with that in the long run. Because like I said, when I was a kid, he was both my mom and dad, and he did a fantastic job at being a single parent. Never even once did he allow me to feel like I was not a priority for him. Things only got messed up recently. It was only after his marriage that he started acting a bit differently, but even then he tried his best to be there for me. That's why I was so skeptical about whatever I was doing in the beginning. If he hadn't been a good father at any point in time, I don't think I would have felt bad about what I was doing at any point either. And that's the point that I'm trying to get across. I know that he messed up, and I know that he messed up in a pretty big way. But I also know that he's apologetic for it right now. Because within a couple of days of my last phone call with him, my grandparents told me that my father was backing out of the whole lawsuit thing. He was not fighting anymore and was willing to come to a settlement with them, and was going to be transparent about everything. Then I told my grandparents about the phone call. I knew that he was going to do exactly what he had said he would do. After I spoke to my grandparents, I also told them how I felt about the situation with my dad. I told them that while I love my grandparents, I also love my father. They seemed to understand where I was coming from, but they warned me that right now things are very tense. I might want to take some time to think about what I want to do and then come to a decision about whether I want to forgive my father or not. But whatever I decide, my grandparents have told me that they are going to stand by my side and try their best to accept it. Even though they have lost their trust and respect for my dad permanently after everything, they won't oppose it if I want to forgive him and let him be a part of my life again. And even though I haven't made a decision yet about whether I want to forgive him right now or not, I feel happy knowing that at least whatever I decide, my grandparents are going to stand by my side. As long as they respect and accept my decision, I don't care what anybody else thinks. Of course, I'm not stupid. I'm aware of the fact that no matter what happens later, things will never be the same between me and my dad ever again because of the things that I have found out about him recently. I don't think I can let myself forget about it easily. The situation between his family and me has gotten so bad. I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to forgive my paternal grandparents anytime soon. Neither am I interested in speaking to them, but my dad is a different story altogether. To be honest, things are just complicated between us right now. I don't know what to make of it. I don't even know if I would do the right thing if I decided to forgive him. The situation is messy weird, and I've just never been in a place like this before, especially not with my family. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with the confusion regarding how I feel about my dad right now. I just don't know what to do. If I do decide to forgive him at any point, I'm pretty sure that we are going to need therapy. Otherwise, I don't really know how we're going to be able to work this out. I know that he asked me to come back, but I don't see that happening anytime soon either. I'm lucky enough to have rich grandparents who could afford to fight for me. But had that not happened, I couldn't even imagine the situation that I would be in right now. It might even get worse with him, and he would have been ready to put me through it, had my grandparents not been able to fight for me. So knowing that changes everything. But currently at the moment, I know he's trying to resolve things. I know it seems like I am just talking in circles at the moment, defending and blaming my father within a few lines. But honestly, that's how things have been in my brain for the past few days. That's how confused I am. So I'm just trying to put it out the best way that I can. Anyway, I think I've spoken about it enough. I need a break. And I don't think I'll be posting for the next couple of weeks until I have been able to come to a decision about what I want to do about everything. Hey, so it's been 3 weeks since my last update. Like I said, I wouldn't be posting until I had decided what I wanted to do. And I have made up my mind finally. I don't think I'm going to be letting my father be involved in my life in the same capacity once again. It was very difficult for me to come to this decision because for the past 3 weeks, I had been in touch with my father on and off, and he was trying desperately to get me to forgive him. I really wanted to, but in the back of my mind, I still had my doubts about him. After a while, I figured out that if I had reservations about him, it would be stupid of me to go back to stay with him or forgive him and pretend that everything was fine. Because at the end of the day, I knew that everything was not fine. Everything will never be fine again because of the things that he has done, and I cannot pretend otherwise. I just can't do it. So the best thing for me to do was stay with my grandparents. They've told me that I'm welcome to stay with them for as long as I want to. They don't have a problem with it, and in fact, It makes them happy. I know that my dad would love to have me back again, but that's not what I want or need right now. So I reached out to him myself today and told him what I had been thinking. I said that after everything that had happened, it would be very difficult for me to bring myself to trust him again. If we were living in the same house once again, I would probably end up feeling very weird about it, especially with Donna around, knowing that she was a part of the whole thing. Throughout the past few weeks, she had never bothered to reach out to me and apologize. I think she knew what she was doing, but she didn't feel sorry about it. My dad tried to correct me at that point, and he tried to tell me that she did feel bad and had thought about contacting me, but then decided against it because that would probably make things worse. But that did not make a difference to me. At the end of the day, she didn't even try. Whether it would have made things worse or better should have been left up to me. The bottom line is that she did not even try. And it did make me a bit upset because I had always been nice to Donna. We had a normal relationship, and obviously, I did not look at her as my mother. But I did give her the respect that she deserved in the family and accepted her. So an apology was the least I could have expected from her, especially after the way she and my father had screwed me over. She didn't say sorry, and after all that happened, I really didn't want to live with him again, at least not now. I planned to keep staying with my grandparents. I would be going to college soon, so I had to leave either way. He seemed really sad at that moment, but he accepted my choice and said that if that's what I wanted, then he was okay with it. He told me that he knew he had lost the right to ask anything from me, but he still wanted to ask if I could keep in touch and meet him sometimes. He felt very sorry about all that happened, all that went wrong, and he understands that he can't do much to fix things for me emotionally, but he wants to try, at least. I thought about it for a few minutes, and then I told him I was okay with staying in touch and seeing him sometimes. I also wanted us to go to therapy and try to work things out with a professional there. I believe we really needed that. He said yes, but I believe that because of how he was feeling, he would have said yes to anything I asked him at that time. I have begun searching for a family therapist, and we will give it a try. We will meet with the therapist once a week. We will also try to make phone calls at least 2 times a week to help sort things out. My grandparents are happy with this plan, and I hope that in the future, everything will be okay again. I just want to take care of my mental health for now.
I turned 15 3 days ago, but things didn't go precisely as planned. My parents surprised me with a family trip to the Callista on my birthday, which I learned about with great delight. I couldn't stop being happy. I was overjoyed since, as the younger, less significant sister, I don't often receive surprises like this. But when I walked downstairs with my luggage to depart with my family a few hours later after I had finished packing, I discovered that my folks had already left. Downstairs, my 17-year-old sister Layla was the only one waiting for me. She is the golden child, the one who consistently manages to convince our parents to comply with her requests. It was the same this time. I realized right away that something wasn't right, since she appeared to be quite joyful. She told me I could go back upstairs and unpack, and that I didn't need to pack my things when I asked her what was going on. I initially believed that the vacation had been completely postponed. She then gave me a sheet of paper with a list of household duties scribbled on it. I had a lot of confusion. Although my parents had surprised me with the vacation early in the morning, Layla informed me that they had made the decision that it would be best for me to remain home and study, because our finals were in a few weeks. She had already completed everything, so in the meanwhile, she could leave. I could concentrate on these domestic chores if I became bored while they were gone in the Callista. She chuckled again and said I should actually be thanking her, instead of appearing offended. Instead of letting me waste time playing outside with my family, she said, she had given me extra time to study and be ready for my finals. I was so wounded that the only thing I could manage to say was to inquire about the whereabouts of our parents. As a birthday present to me, Layla informed me that she had already sent them on their way to the airport, but had lingered behind to personally deliver this message. She stated that Layla had brought up my finals shortly after my parents surprised us with the vacation, but they wanted me to know they weren't putting false hopes in my head. They believed that this was a good thing since they couldn't ignore it. They couldn't bring themselves to shatter my heart, so they had let Layla to inform me. I had no doubt that Layla enjoyed and appreciated the chance to make fun of me in such a way. I pushed down the need to cry in front of her and took my stuff back upstairs. I waited until I heard the front door close before giving in to my tears, which lasted for an hour. Layla has always detested me, and I've always understood that my parents will follow her instructions without question, since she has the ultimate say-so. However, I never thought they would be that mean and degrading to me on my birthday. I've had my fair share of arguments with Layla in the past, and my parents have always supported her, but this was unthinkable. I even emailed my pals on my birthday morning to let them know I wouldn't be able to spend the evening with them as planned after my parents informed me about the surprise trip. They couldn't believe my parents had planned anything similar for me. Some things are, I suppose, just too wonderful to be true. The more I considered my predicament when I stopped weeping, the worse I felt. To get even with my parents and Layla, I made the decision to do something I knew would immensely enrage them. Since I was alone myself at home, I walked into my dad's office and used his phone to call every significant person I could find on his MacBook. I had planned a celebration for my parents' anniversary that evening, and I extended an invitation to them. My intention was to take them by surprise. Despite being invited at the last minute, the majority of his business associates accepted. I treated my mother in the same way. It was simple for me because neither of them had left their password-protected gadgets at home. I sent the same message and extended an invitation to Layla's boyfriend to attend the nighttime party by text message on Instagram. I also invited my own friends, and I enlisted their assistance in decorating the house to resemble a party. When the visitors arrived about 7 o'clock in the evening, they were surprised to discover that my parents had vanished from sight. I informed them that it was an evening surprise, and that they would learn the truth eventually. I executed my plan after taking a group shot with every visitor when they had all arrived. I gave them the precise location of my parents, described how I had been handled, and mentioned how my parents had always complied with Layla's requests. I had never said that I was essentially Cinderella until today. Because Layla felt it was the appropriate thing to do, I revealed what had happened on my birthday, and how my parents had abandoned me without even trying to make an in-person explanation. A great deal of folks were astonished. While my parents present a pleasant and decent front, they don't treat their own children in such a way. I informed everyone that my sister and my parents were the reason I had hosted the party after telling my story. I could see her lover was taken aback to discover her nasty side when I gave them the list of tasks Layla had left me. I said something, and everyone fell silent, till finally people started to leave. Before they went, several came up to comfort me. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but the only thing I felt horrible about was squandering their time. I sent my parents and Layla the group photo after everyone had departed, writing, "Had some guests over for my birthday party today. I believe the list Layla left me will eventually be begun. It was the ideal scheme." My parents replied to that message in a matter of seconds, asking me to undo what I had done, and that they would be returning home on the following flight. I went to my closest friend Sophie's place with my suitcases and blocked them all. I realized the place was no longer mine. Sophie's parents are very kind individuals who have consistently assured me that their doors will always be open. I made the choice to move in with them after accepting their offer. I'm not sure how long Sophie's family will be able to help me, but for the time being, I'm really appreciative to them for allowing me to stay in their house. Anyway, I had no communication from my folks on my birthday. However, they visited Sophie's home the next day. Since everyone knew that Sophie and I had been close friends since we were young, I suppose no one was shocked that I had decided to stay with her. I had made it quite apparent that I was not interested in dealing with her parents, so when my parents arrived, they refused to let them in and told them they had no business attempting to talk to me. I became a little afraid when my parents threatened to file a lawsuit against Sophie's parents. I then instructed them to invite my folks inside, and that I would be available for a conversation. They were enraged with me and told me I had no right to implicate their business colleagues, regardless of what they had done. They said that no colleagues or associates would even talk to them, and that their entire reputation was in shambles. Some of them were blaming me for everything, even going so far as to block my parents. I think it's fair to hold me accountable because I did plan the whole thing, but I also informed them that I wouldn't have done all of this if they had been a little more kind and hadn't made fun of me on my birthday. I finally lost my cool and yelled at them, accusing them of treating me worse than Layla and ruining my life along with my parents. That was something I could never forgive them for. Sophie's parents had to step in because things got pretty hot and we were all screaming at each other. To help me relax, Sophie had to usher me out of the room. Her parents came to me and told me that my folks had departed after I had finally calmed down. They would see to it that I never spoke to my parents until I was ready to see them. They advised me to really think about taking legal action, such as emancipating myself from my parents. It was time to permanently remove them out of my life, since it was becoming more and more clear that they didn't give a damn about me. We are now thinking about emancipation after I chose to consult with a lawyer after talking with Sophie's parents about this. Since this is a big choice, and I don't want to look back, I'm still not sure what to think about it. However, given the current direction of events, I doubt I will regret it. I refuse to let my parents contact me again, but they did so yesterday. I was able to identify my parents from the email address I received last evening. I made a great effort not to open it, but eventually my curiosity got the better of me, and I read it. They began by explaining that one of my father's clients had established a new spa and resort in the Callista, which is why they were surprising me with the trip. My dad chose to take advantage of this chance around my birthday, because it was a benefit for the family. But they didn't want my marks to suffer later, because I had taken a holiday just a few weeks before my examinations, which is why Layla brought up my finals. They were shocked that I thought it was something terrible, and attempted to exact revenge on them. They believed it gave the impression that they hadn't reared me properly. Layla wanted to be a nice, caring big sister to me, but she was sad herself. They said that I didn't have to overreact in the manner that I did. All of it was a load of nonsense. I nearly quit reading the email halfway through because I was so irritated. The following section was their outrage that I had exposed our filthy laundry in public and engaged other people. They remarked that no matter how many arguments we had, I had never gone to them and confided in them about my problems. They felt that they could have reconciled with me if I had talked to them just once. They insisted that Layla's list of tasks was a little excessive, but I ought to have phoned them later and addressed the matter. If they had known I was feeling abandoned, they would have returned right away. They were unhappy with everything, though, because of the unexpected way I had handled the matter. They said that this was all a regrettable mistake that had been exaggerated, and that they truly didn't wish to harm me. They want me to talk to them so we can work things out, but at this point, I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm feeling a lot of different things about this. So, could someone please assist me with this? Aite for planning a party and exposing my parents to all of their business acquaintances and co-workers after they neglected me while on vacation? First update. All right, so the majority of you believe that what I did was totally justified and that they deserved it. That I'm not in need of an apology. I have thus made the decision to not apologize. To prevent them from contacting me, I blocked the email address they were using to get in touch with me. Even though I know they can simply create a new address and try to contact me again, I'll continue to block them. I've already decided that I won't read or reply to whatever they try to say. It's simply not worthwhile. In terms of liberation, I've made the decision to follow through. I understand that I'm still too young, but it's a big thing. However, Sophie and her parents have promised me that they would support me no matter what. If it helps calm my nerves, they even stated they could legally adopt me. That's not anything I've considered yet. We are simply considering the emancipation at this time. After speaking with an attorney, the paperwork is being completed. I genuinely have no idea how my folks will respond. I could tell they were unhappy with my decision to move in with Sophie and her parents when they wrote me that email. It doesn't even make sense to me since it's clear from the way I've been treated that they value Layla more than they do me. It's odd that they're still attempting to get in touch with me. It seems like all they want me back for is to restore their reputation. I'm perplexed right now. All I can do is watch to see how they respond after they receive the documents. They didn't try to contact me again after that email, and it has been a few days since I posted. I've heard that Layla and her boyfriend broke up, and there were a lot of people at the party I invited, so I know things can't be good for them either. Everyone knows why, but not me. Second update. Hello everyone. So a few days ago, the papers pertaining to my legal emancipation were finally given to my parents. I was surprised to learn that they were unhappy about it. There was a heated argument when they phoned Sophie's parents. They thought that I was being controlled by Sophie and her parents, who had set me up for this. They didn't believe that I was acting voluntarily. It didn't make sense to me because I was acting voluntarily, especially in light of how poorly they had treated me. I didn't need any outside pressure to decide this. After my last update, a lot of you indicated they would attempt to save face and say I was being a brat, so I kind of expected this type of response. They were really irate with me since I chose not to return their favor. It won't erase the reality that Sophie's parents deserve this, no matter what names they choose to give them. I will soon be rid of them, as they don't deserve to be my parents. Sophie informed me that, despite my inability to listen closely, my parents had evidently called her parents every epithet in the book. They had threatened to sue them and take this matter to court, claiming that they had no right to subject me to such absurdity. They were extremely angry, and I felt it was strange that they had threatened to injure them. That's not legal, and it will just make them seem worse. I hope they recognize that. The way they had described me to Sophie's parents just confirmed my preconceived notions about them. Their desire to improve their public image overcame their affection for me as a daughter, not because they wanted me back. They'd made no mention of wanting to talk to me or have me back. They persisted in asserting that they were aware of Sophie's parents' desire to damage their image by seeming to be rescuers. My parents believed that Sophie's parents were attempting to expose my mistreatment at home to the public. They had been shouting over the phone, apparently, about how entitled and spoilt I had been. The fact that Sophie and her parents backed me simply served to highlight their unfit status as parents. They would have cared more for my well-being if they had truly loved me as a daughter, I'm quite sure. Rather than scream at Sophie's parents and seem to be attempting to harm my parents' image, they would have made an effort to speak with me. In any case, why would they want to do that? My parents and Sophie's parents are new to one another. They have no motivation to compete, as they have only come to know each other through the two of us. Given that Sophie's parents are far more prosperous and kind than anybody else, it's not like there's any competition at all. However, my parents believe Sophie's parents are just like them since they are so preoccupied with maintaining their perceived image. They think Sophie's parents are just trying to make fun of them and are incapable of caring about me. I really want to let my parents know that Sophie's parents are real and aren't acting like I need saving. Since it was them that I needed to be saved from, they are indeed my saviors. Instead of creating further turmoil, my parents would have expressed regret for what they had done if they had only realized that in the first place. However, no matter how tempted I am, Sophie and her parents have given me strong orders not to get in touch with them. It's simply not worthwhile. I am aware that a few days ago, my parents gave them a call. They informed me they had taped the call after arguing with me over the phone and providing me with only the information they deemed essential. My parents were really foolish because they might utilize it as proof that I should be freed from their control. They also said they wanted me to consider if I wanted to be formally adopted by them. Since I truly like them, I ultimately decided to say yes. It's not just because I know this will make my folks further angrier. The main reason is that I honestly think they are incredibly wonderful and decent individuals. I'm all in since having Sophie as my sister will be a perk. They have informed me that they will talk with the attorney again to begin the necessary paperwork. Knowing that I have better people to live with and rely on might also aid my emancipation cause. To be honest, things keep getting better, and for that, I am really appreciative of them. Third update. Hello. It was a really bad day. To cut a long tale short, Layla severely beat me after school. The English lesson I had last week was in the school's East Wing. She practically surrounded me with a group of her buddies while I was out of class. Unfortunately, because I take a very long time to pack my belongings, I am usually the last one out of class. The majority of individuals had left the classroom by the time I departed. I was a little terrified to see Layla and her pals standing outside, but I tried not to show it. They were really upset with me and told me I couldn't leave the classroom when I tried to. They informed me they had some tasks to settle with me and forced everyone else who was lingering in the classroom to leave. They didn't appear to mind that I made an effort to remain composed and square up so that my panic wouldn't come through. I shouted at Layla to let me go as she took hold of my arm and brought me outside. No one else could hear me since everyone else was talking loudly. Then they dragged me into the janitor's closet, locked me in, and left me there. They were standing outside while I continued to pound on the door. Even if someone heard me, they wouldn't dare take action because Layla and her pals have a bad reputation and are often in the senior class. Layla let me out after he had me in there for over 5 minutes. At that point, almost everyone in that school wing had left, leaving only me and myself against them. She screamed at me at that point, and I took the first slap in the face. She stated I was ungrateful to our parents and branded me selfish. Then it became clear why she was really upset. She blamed me for her boyfriend's breakup with her. She then banged my head on the concrete, which made me feel quite lightheaded. Taking advantage of the situation, she continued to beat me with her fists, while her buddies laughed and watched. It hurt so bad. I made an effort to protect myself, but Layla was considerably heavier and several inches taller. I really began curling up against the wall at one point, but she persisted in beating me. She gave me one last kick when she was pleased, and then she and her pals went as I sobbed against the wall. Sophie eventually discovered me sitting on the floor sobbing uncontrollably around 15 minutes later. She assisted me in getting up after I told her what had happened. I was too sick to walk, so we opted to take a cab home instead of going there together. Her folks seemed quite sad when I told them everything when we arrived home. They called the police after they had already contacted the school. They are rather busy because they have only been speaking on the phone for an hour since then. However, because I'm hurting very badly, Sophie is taking care of me. Everything hurts, and the bruises are only now beginning to appear. Nonetheless, I'm confident that Layla will soon receive her just desserts for this. Fourth update. Greetings. There are several topics I would want to discuss. All I'll do is attempt to make it brief and pleasant. Layla physically assaulted me last week, but luckily the school protected me. They gave the cops access to the security footage from that building's wing. It was not too difficult to charge her with a misdemeanor, and as compensation, she was required to perform community service. The greatest part is that she was also given a 6-week suspension after that. She had been eagerly awaiting prom, but it appears that she won't be able to go. She won't be allowed to take her final exams in front of the whole class either. She can't get away with it by lying. She has to be seated apart. I believe it is highly merited, and when Sophie informed me of everything, I felt a great sense of vindication. The fact that my parents chose to give up my rights following the Layla incident is another fantastic thing that happened. Yes, they renounced their parental rights toward me. I'm finally free because the paperwork has been signed. I am really appreciative of Sophie's parents, who are currently working on formally adopting me. After everything that transpired, my parents said they no longer wanted me to be a part of their family. They will undoubtedly attempt to paint me as the guilty party, but I doubt anyone will go for that. So long as they give it their all, it doesn't concern me. To be honest, I feel like I'm a member of a joyful family now. My new sister and parents are definitely better than the ones I had before, I can attest to that. The fact that things are now going well for me truly amazes me. I think I've never felt happier as I do right now. In fact, I had completely forgotten that my finals were approaching. But now that Sophie and I are becoming serious, we're going to prove to everyone what kind of person I am.
During our honeymoon, my mother-in-law pulled off a shocking betrayal by stealing my $25,000 diamond necklace. When we got home, and I asked her about it, She exploded in anger. She slapped me hard and pushed me against the wall. To my surprise, my husband stood by her side. Heartbroken, I left the house, planning my revenge. They had no idea I had a big surprise coming that would change everything. My name's Lisa, and I'm a 30-year-old software developer living in San Francisco. When I think back to my life, I can still remember the excitement of my wedding day, the hope I felt for the future, and the way my heart swelled with love for my college sweetheart, James. We had met during our university years and bonded over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of what our lives would look like. I thought I had found my perfect partner. But as the saying goes, the path to true happiness isn't always smooth. Shortly after we exchanged vows, I realized that my fairy tale was beginning to unravel. The first signs of trouble were subtle, like a slow leak in a tire that gradually worsens until you're stranded on the side of the road. The culprit? James's mother, Martha. Martha, a woman in her mid-50s, raised James on her own and had always been fiercely protective of him. I had seen this dynamic during our dating years. She often called him several times a day, insisting on knowing his whereabouts and opinions on everything. I had assumed it was just a quirky part of their relationship, something I could work around. After all, love is about compromise, right? But once we were married, her interference turned into something much more invasive. Almost immediately, Martha began criticizing my choices, everything from the way I decorated our home to the meals I prepared. I remember one particular instance when she visited unannounced and found me experimenting with a new recipe. "What are you cooking, Lisa?" "That looks awful," she said with a disdainful look on her face, as if she were inspecting a science experiment gone wrong. "Just trying a new pasta dish, Martha," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Isn't it a bit too rich?" "You should stick to the basics," she retorted, shaking her head. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, but I tried to brush it off. I thought she means well. I kept reminding myself that she was just trying to help, even when it felt like she was tearing me down. As weeks turned into months, her visits became more frequent and less welcome. She would drop by without calling, using a spare key that I didn't even know she had. I would walk into our living room, only to find her rearranging the furniture as if it were her own home. "This will give the space a better flow," she would say, waving her hand dismissively when I expressed my hesitations. The tension between Martha and me grew, and James seemed oblivious. Whenever I would try to bring it up, he would shrug it off, saying things like, "You know how my mom is. Just try to be patient." It was infuriating. How could he not see how her behavior was affecting me? I began to feel isolated, trapped in a situation where my voice was drowned out by his mother's constant interference. The love I felt for James started to fade under the weight of frustration and hurt. Then, one day, James suggested we go on a honeymoon to Hawaii, a chance to reconnect and escape the chaos. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Finally, a break for Martha. However, that relief was short-lived when Martha insisted on joining us. "James, I don't think that's a good idea," I said, trying to mask my panic. But James, for the first time, stood his ground. "Mom, it's not a family trip. It's our honeymoon, just Lisa and me." I was stunned. This was the first time I saw him assert himself against his mother, and it filled me with hope. Maybe there was a chance for us after all. When we returned from the trip, everything seemed to be in place. James and I had rekindled our romance, and I was excited to return home. But when I opened the door to our bedroom, my heart dropped. Our room was a disaster zone. Clothes were thrown everywhere, jewelry drawers were broken, and my precious diamond necklace, a wedding gift from my mother worth $25,000, was missing. "James, come here," I screamed, my voice shaking. "What's wrong?" he asked, rushing into the room. "I can't find my necklace. Look at this mess. What happened here?" I gestured wildly at the chaos. James's face paled as he surveyed the room. "I don't know." "This is so strange," he muttered, confusion and concern etched across his face. Desperate, I turned to him. "Do you think it could be?" "No, Lisa. I can't believe my mother would do something like this," he interrupted, his tone defensive. I swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in my stomach. But deep down, the suspicion crept in. I couldn't shake the feeling that Martha was somehow involved. I needed to find answers. That night, sleep eluded me as I tossed and turned, haunted by the disarray of our bedroom and the absence of my cherished necklace. I couldn't understand how Martha could betray me like this. The woman who I thought was merely overbearing had transformed into someone I feared. The following day, I decided to take action. I visited several jewelry stores in the area, searching for any sign of my necklace. After hours of looking and nearly giving up hope, I entered a small shop tucked away in a corner of the city. As I scanned the displays, my heart stopped. There it was, my diamond necklace gleaming under the glass. "Excuse me," I called the shopkeeper over. "Can I see that necklace, please?" When I held it in my hands, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. I needed to know who had sold it. "Can you show me the CCTV footage from when this necklace came in?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. The shopkeeper obliged, and as I watched the footage, my heart sank. There, clearly on the screen, was Martha, my mother-in-law, handing over my precious necklace. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, anger, and disbelief. Furious, I rushed home, ready to confront her. But as I approached the door, I found Martha waiting for me, arms crossed and a smug smile on her face. "What are you doing here, Lisa? You look like you've seen a ghost," she sneered. "Don't play games with me, Martha." "I know what you did," I snapped, my heart pounding. Her smile faltered for a moment, and in that split second, I felt a surge of confidence. I had the proof, but what happened next would change everything. I was about to confront the woman who had wreaked havoc in my life. I just didn't know how deep the betrayal would run. Standing at the doorstep, I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. Martha's presence was suffocating, and I felt the anger bubbling inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. I had never imagined confronting my mother-in-law would feel like this, like stepping into a battlefield where the stakes were so high. "Lisa, why are you staring at me like that? If you have something to say, just say it," Martha said, her tone dripping with mockery. "Enough with the games, Martha. I know you sold my diamond necklace," I blurted out, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "I saw you on the security footage at the jewelry store." Her expression changed instantaneously. The smugness vanished, replaced by a flicker of anger. "How dare you accuse me of stealing?" she retorted, her voice rising. "You've always had a wild imagination, haven't you?" "I'm not imagining anything. You took something that doesn't belong to you, and it's time you admit it." I shot back, stepping closer to her, unwilling to let her intimidation tactics work on me this time. Martha's eyes narrowed as she took a step forward, invading my personal space. "You think you can come into my house and throw accusations at me? You're just jealous that I raised James alone and that he still cares for me. You'll never be as important as his mother," she spat, her voice full of venom. "Being his wife doesn't mean I'm less important. You need to understand that I'm part of this family too, but you act like I'm just an inconvenience," I replied, my heart racing. I felt an overwhelming need to defend myself, to make her see that I was not going to back down this time. Suddenly, James walked through the door, a bag of groceries in hand. The moment he saw us standing there, tension thick in the air, he dropped the bag and rushed over. "What's going on? Why does it look like you two are about to kill each other?" "Martha has been lying to me, James. I know she sold my necklace, and I'm done pretending everything is fine," I said, my voice rising. I turned to him, desperate for support. "You need to believe me. I have proof." James looked between us, confusion etched on his face. "Mom, is this true?" he asked, his tone wavering. "I didn't do anything. Lisa is just trying to stir up trouble because she can't handle the fact that I'm still in your life," Martha interjected, throwing her hands up defensively. James's gaze shifted from his mother to me, and I could see the turmoil in his eyes. "I need to hear this from both of you. What exactly happened?" he asked, trying to mediate. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "I found the necklace in a pawn shop, James. I have the footage. Your mother sold it while we were on our honeymoon, I explained, the words rushing out of me. James turned to Martha, who was now visibly sweating, her composure cracking. Is that true? Did you sell Lisa's necklace? I borrowed it, she stammered, trying to twist the narrative. I thought it was just lying around. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Borrowed? It's not borrowing if you sell it, I shouted, my frustration boiling over. You stole it. You knew how much it meant to me. Stop yelling, both of you, James shouted, his voice echoing in the small entryway. This is not helping. Mom, why would you do something like this? It was a mistake. Martha snapped, her defensive nature kicking in. I thought it was just an old piece of jewelry, something that was forgotten. I didn't know it was special to her. Enough of your excuses, I exclaimed. You've done nothing but disrespect me since day one. I've tried to be patient, but this is crossing a line. James's silence was deafening. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for him to pull me back or let me fall. I can't believe this, James finally said, looking defeated. Mom, you have to understand what you did is unacceptable. We need to figure out how to fix this. Fix this? How can we fix this when she's made it clear she doesn't trust me? I said, pointing at Martha. I'm done being the one who has to compromise. You need to make a choice, James. Martha's eyes flashed with anger as she took a step back, her expression darkening. You think you can come into our family and make demands? You're nothing without my son. That statement stung like a slap to the face, and I felt tears prick my eyes. I am not nothing. I am his wife, and I deserve your respect. James looked between us, visibly torn. I need time to think, he finally said, his voice low. I can't deal with this right now. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with Martha. The tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I felt a sense of despair wash over me, knowing that things had reached a breaking point. Your husband is weak, Lisa, Martha sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. You'll never win this fight. I will always be his mother. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic environment any longer. I felt like a puppet on strings, and it was time to cut them. I needed to reclaim my life, my identity, and my dignity. With that thought, I turned on my heel and walked out, determined to find a way to seek justice for the betrayal I had suffered. Leaving James and Martha in that heated moment was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I felt like I was walking away from my marriage, but I knew that staying would only lead to more heartache. As I drove back to my mother's house, my heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. I couldn't let Martha's betrayal go unpunished. When I arrived, my mother was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner. The smell of her famous lasagna filled the air, and for a brief moment, I felt comforted. But the weight of my troubles came crashing back as I recounted the events of the day. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you're going through this, my mother said, her eyes filled with concern. You deserve so much better. I need to do something about it, Mom. I can't just let her get away with this, I replied, my voice firm. I'm going to report her to the police. My mother's face reflected my own determination. If that's what you think is best, then I support you. We'll gather any evidence you need. That night, we pored over the footage from the jewelry store and made a list of everything that had happened. I documented my conversations with James, highlighting how dismissive he had been about Martha's behavior. I felt empowered, like I was taking back control over my life. The next day, I contacted the local police department and scheduled an appointment to report the theft. As I prepared for my meeting, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, nervousness, anger, but also a sense of purpose. I was no longer the quiet wife being pushed around. I was ready to stand up for myself. When I arrived at the station, I was greeted by an officer who took me into a small room to discuss my case. I showed him the footage of Martha selling the necklace and explained the situation. The officer listened intently, nodding along as I spoke. This is a serious matter, Ms. Miller. Theft is not something we take lightly. We'll need to investigate further, but I assure you that we will do everything we can to help you, he said, his tone reassuring. Relief washed over me as I left the station. I had taken the first step toward justice, and I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was determined to see this through, no matter how hard it might be. Over the next few days, the police worked diligently on my case, collecting evidence and reaching out to pawn shops in the area. They were able to confirm the sale of my necklace and also uncovered additional details that pointed to Martha's history of questionable behavior. One afternoon, as I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table, my phone rang. It was the officer I had spoken to earlier. "Ms. Miller, we've gathered enough evidence to move forward with an arrest. Would you like to be present when we take your mother-in-law into custody?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment, the gravity of the situation hitting me. But then I remembered how much Martha had hurt me, how she had invaded my life and disrespected my marriage. "Yes, I want to be there," I replied, my voice steady. The following day, I drove to the location where they had planned to arrest Martha. My heart raced as I waited, anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. I couldn't believe it had come to this. My mother-in-law, the woman who was supposed to support me, was about to face the consequences of her actions. When the police arrived, they approached Martha as she was leaving her house, her usual air of arrogance stripped away. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. "Martha Ellen, you are under arrest for theft," the officer announced, and I felt a surge of triumph rush through me. This was justice. As they handcuffed her and led her away, I stood there, watching her world crumble. I realized that I was finally free from the chains that had bound me, and in that moment, I felt empowered. I was no longer the victim. I was a survivor, ready to reclaim my life. The day Martha was arrested marked a pivotal moment in my life. I had faced her down and taken control of my own narrative. After the police took her away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and an undeniable sense of empowerment. I knew that I had done the right thing, but the reality of the situation weighed heavily on my heart. In the days that followed, I found myself in a whirlwind of legal processes. Martha's arrest led to charges of theft, and I learned that she would likely face serious consequences for her actions. I felt a sense of closure starting to form, but I also had to confront the fact that my marriage with James was hanging by a thread. James reached out to me multiple times, pleading for a chance to talk. I was hesitant, but knew we needed to address the elephant in the room. One evening, we met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. As I walked in, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. Could we salvage our relationship, or had too much damage been done? "Lisa, I'm so glad you agreed to meet," James said, his voice shaky as he sat down across from me. "I've been worried sick about you." "I've been worried about you too, James," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But we need to talk about everything that's happened. You need to understand how hurtful your mother's actions were and how your support, or lack thereof, affected me." He nodded, looking down at his coffee. "I know. I can't believe she would do something like that. I should have stood up for you sooner. I'm sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, James. Your mother has caused irreparable harm," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I've lost trust in both of you. You need to decide whose side you're on." "I'm on your side, Lisa." "I love you," he exclaimed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Then you need to prove it." "I can't continue in a marriage where I feel like a second-class citizen," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You need to choose between me and her." We talked for hours, but it was clear that the rift between us was too wide. Although he professed his love for me, I couldn't shake the feeling that his loyalty to his mother would always come first. As we parted ways that evening, I knew I had made my decision. The following week, I filed for divorce. It was painful, but I felt lighter, as if I had shed a weight I had been carrying for far too long. Martha's court date was set for a few weeks later. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation as I entered the courtroom. I wanted to see justice served, to show Martha that her actions had consequences. When she walked in, she looked older, more haggard than I had ever seen her. It was a stark reminder of how far things had fallen. The proceedings were swift. The evidence was clear, and it didn't take long for the judge to issue a verdict. Martha was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay restitution for the necklace, along with additional fines totaling $25,000. As the gavel struck, I felt a surge of vindication. This was justice, and I had finally reclaimed my life. With the divorce finalized shortly after and Martha's fate sealed, I began to embrace my newfound freedom. I focused on my career, pouring my energy into projects that inspired me. I took up new hobbies, explored the city, and spent quality time with my mother, who had been my rock throughout this tumultuous journey. In the months that followed, I learned to cherish my independence. I discovered my strength in solitude and began to rebuild my life on my terms. I reflected on the lessons I had learned about trust, respect, and the importance of standing up for myself. As I sat in my apartment one evening, sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset over the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was no longer bound by the toxicity of my past. I had turned the page and was ready to embrace a bright new chapter filled with hope and possibilities. I had faced betrayal and fought for justice, and now I was finally free.